Hello, and welcome to the Teaching Together podcast, where we celebrate and share the glows and grows of teacher life. I'm Grace.
And I'm Sierra. Each episode on the podcast, we like to start with a glow or grow that's been happening for us in our teacher life. I'm going to kick us off with a grow. Okay, it is still early 2025. And I'm putting it out here right now for everybody to hear that my grow for this year is to try and keep my desk and my classroom in some state of organization.
Oh, that is an admirable goal because same.
Oh my goodness. It's just, I am the type of person who procrastinates.
Oh yeah.
And procrastina sorts. So what often happens is I just let my desk and my classroom get to extreme states of disarray. And then when I have a batch of marking to do, I just go and clean instead.
Yeah, because you're getting stuff done. Like you need to clean.
That's right. I'm not actually procrastinating. I'm just, using my time on something else that really needs to be done. Anyway, so in addition to my own organizational strategies, just trying to be much more diligent with giving my kids an appropriate amount of pack-up time and holding them to account also for the space rather than sort of, the bell goes and they rush out the door and then it becomes my problem, but I don't have time to deal with it right now. And I think it's something I want to be better at, to love my colleagues as well, because it's not just my space. And also to just assist with being able to find things when I need them. Anyway, that's my grow.
I love that for you. I love that for me. I love that for teachers everywhere. We salute you, Sierra.
Thank you.
I too have a grow, which is just, it's a bit broad in terms of I am very now intentionally focusing on different areas of my teaching practice to improve that are quite specific to my school context. But now that I've had 1 year of kind of just trying to keep my head above water, I can go, oh, actually, I see how that worked and that didn't. And I need to integrate the habits of mind better into all my lessons. And my lesson plans need to look like this instead of this. And I need to spend more time preparing this type of resource, but this one, not so much. And I have a much clearer idea of how I want to shape my teaching practice now that I've had a go, even though those poor students, that wasn't a go for them. That was their real kindergarten. But, they all survived. They were all fed and toileted and loved every day,
and they can read and write.
I taught them to read and write and do math stuff. Some of them still don't know which way a 9 goes, but that's all right. But yeah, so just very generally, but also specifically in terms of it's kind of my whole teaching practice, but I now have some focus areas that I have context for, and I can go, actually, yeah, I know some actual concrete specific ways that I can improve on these things, some of which are really specific to my school life, the habits of mind and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm quite motivated now because I have that concrete idea to tackle this instead of going, oh, it's too much, I don't know what I'm doing. And the early stages of kindergarten, we're all learning together and I'm teaching all these routines and learning kids' names and everything is just chaos all the time and it takes us 4 hours to eat. So I'm not teaching them anything, but yeah, I'm feeling very optimistic at this early stage of the term that I can do this and I can improve my practice a little bit at a time. But also it's okay if I'm not perfect because I can still teach my kids to read and write and, math.
Absolutely. And it sounds to me, Grace, like you might be fostering a really positive error climate in your
I am
own brain.
Definitely fostering a positive error climate.
Hopefully you know what we're talking about, but if you missed it, last week we did have a chat about errors and making mistakes in the classroom and how to foster a positive error climate to really boost our students' motivation and confidence and self-efficacy with learning tasks. So if you did miss it, make sure you go back and have a listen. It's a really good episode for thinking about how we're going to set expectations around errors for the whole of the year to come.
Today's episode is going to be focused on one of those areas of improvement that I have personally identified in my teaching practice. It was one of those things that was constantly on my to-do list last year, and I just never got around to it because I was, a first-year teacher. And there's what is time? There is no time. No time for anything. So we're going to be looking at extending and challenging learners at it's not just for those super capable, quote unquote, fast finisher activity kind of things. But it also is designed for those students who, might get a handle on whatever you're teaching really quickly. And you're kind of like, okay, what can I do to not just keep you busy, but give you meaningful challenges? So there's a bit of a flexible strategy in that different students might be attempting it at different stages depending on where they are. But I found it really helpful looking at this particular resource that I will explain in a moment. Just thinking about some practical ways to challenge students meaningfully that kind of just gave me a springboard to jump off and feel like I had an idea of what I could do. So 2 birds, 1 stone. You guys get a great episode, hopefully. And I get to do some PD. But before we go any further, it is time for tea. To exactly no one's surprise, I'm drinking tea too. It is green rose, which used to be my favorite. I think I mentioned it on this podcast before. It's really lovely. Highly recommend if China jasmine is too, quote unquote, dry for you. I don't know, people describe wine as dry, and wine is a beverage. So I describe tea as dry. And I think China jasmine is too dry of a green tea for me. And green rose it's in that sweet spot. It's got rose in it. What more could you want? Sierra, what are you drinking?
I am enjoying New York breakfast still. This was a gift from Grace for Christmas, and she also got me this beautiful tea travel mug. It's really cool because you can put the loose leaves in it and not have them fall out at you while you're trying to drink the tea.
It's been designed very well.
It's very cool. So I've been enjoying that at school actually. And I was drinking lots of New York breakfast on my slow school holiday mornings. And so it's kind of helping me to hold on to the enjoyment of those, even though we are now very well and truly back into the busyness of term time.
Everyone needs their emotional support beverage. One of my kindergarten colleagues often has 3 emotional support beverages at our meetings, and I respect her so much for that. And now that we have our emotional support beverages, we are well prepared to dive into the episode today. And all of this information is coming from a really helpful source from the Australian Education Research Organisation, acronym spelling AERO, which just makes me hungry because I do love a good AERO chocolate bar. I love mint. I know some people hate it. I love it. It's great.
I also love it.
And every time I see the AERO acronym, I think of the chocolate immediately and then go, hey, wait a second, we're talking about research. But anyway, and they have put together what they call a practice guide. And they've got different practice guides on a bunch of really helpful things. So I recommend just going to the AERO website and heading to the resources section. We will link this particular document in our show notes, and it is the Extend and Challenge document, which is designed to help teachers provide appropriately challenging opportunities for students to apply, extend, and demonstrate mastery of their learning. So what is the Extend and Challenge practice, and why should we bother? First of all, extending and challenging involves designing learning activities that come after your explicit teaching and practice and that kind of thing, that enable all students to transfer what they now know and can do to new or unfamiliar problems, situations, or contexts. So they're applying their knowledge and growing their knowledge, but they're using their knowledge now. They're not just generating knowledge, they're not just summarizing knowledge, they're now actually using it.
And if we think a little bit about what we spoke about in the last episode, we know how important errors and making mistakes are to learning. And I guess we can't actually let our students do that unless they're at a point where they're actually able to try and use that knowledge and those skills in increasingly complex situations. So that's also a really big part of this extend and challenge, I guess, phase of the teaching and learning cycle, because we need to give them an opportunity to both demonstrate their understanding but actually strengthen their skills through trying things that are more complex or trying things with less guidance.
Yes, exactly. Some of the scaffolding is gone, or all of the scaffolding is gone. It's designed to be a more independent phase of learning, which could be collaborative among peers, but we'll get to that.
What I really love and want to ask you about is, as someone who works in an inquiry-based school, I think a lot of the research that AERO talks about is very explicit teaching focused, and they're obviously talking about this extend and challenge phase as something that happens after explicit teaching. For the sake of briefly diving into the argument about explicit versus inquiry-based instruction, I think it's really interesting that maybe you see how those things go hand in hand. And do you want to speak to that for a minute?
I do. This actually reminds me of a conversation I was having with my grade leader when we were doing some programming, just the two of us, on a random day in the holidays. And we were kind of talking about the order in which we wanted to do certain activities, because there are some things like, I think I had a bit of a misconception about inquiry teaching and learning last year in terms of, oh, it's just like free discovery or exploration or whatever. But we are still in inquiry lessons. There's still a very specific understanding, or what we call generalization, that we want our students to come to, and we are scaffolding the path for them with specifically designed learning experiences that allow them to use their agency and allow their responses to kind of shape the flow of the lesson. But we are going to get to a predetermined destination. It's kind of like, instead of a really narrow footpath, we're on a very wide, meandering, like forest traily thing. We're in a lane. I'm thinking of a beautiful like English lane right now, that is wide, but it still has fences on either side. But you can meander within those constraints all you want. You can do a big zigzag. You can do a circle. You can backtrack. You can smell the roses for a bit if you want, but you can't wander outside of those boundaries, because we're still trying to teach them things, and we don't want them to come away with any misconceptions. And actually, as I was doing a bit of reading for this episode, I was thinking, actually, with inquiry, we do a lot of this kind of thing just embedded in our lessons, not as a designated final thing, not something to build towards, but something that we integrate with some more teacher-led things to give students autonomy and to actually get them thinking. Because something my grade leader was telling me in our little collaboration session, she said that we want the students to be doing the thinking. We don't want them to just be practicing a skill. We want them to be aware of the purpose all the time from the very beginning. And I quite like the idea of embedding, they refer to it as deep learning in this AERO document a lot. And just the way that inquiry learning works is we don't throw students in the deep end so much. We do encourage them to take responsible risks in their learning and to make mistakes. But it's not, because when I was at school, I actually remember doing this specific maths program thing that was designed to be like an extension, a challenge, whatever. And it was lots of problem solving and open-ended stuff. And it felt like it was the end of the unit. And that really stressed me out, because I was like, oh, the stakes are really high on this. And my self-efficacy was quite low in maths. And so I did not feel capable at all. I was really stressed. And it felt very cumulative and like high stakes, because it was at the quote unquote end of this unit. But we try and build those things in along the way in inquiry learning, so that students are constantly being asked to apply their knowledge, and they're constantly being asked to, critique what they've learned and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think the main difference between what AERO is talking about with explicit instruction and inquiry-based instruction is the placement of this kind of this extended challenge phase. We wouldn't even call it a phase, I don't think, in inquiry. It's kind of just part of the program, but definitely a part that I need to get better at, especially because in kindergarten you have some students who pick up everything really quickly, or they've had lots of practice at home with very eager beaver parents before they even come to school. And then you have those kids that just don't get it. It takes them all year to pick it up. And that's just the nature of kindergarten. And so I was really interested in doing this episode so that I could equip myself and also all you wonderful listeners with some tips and tricks on how can we extend and challenge at any stage of the learning journey, because some students will be ready for that and some will not. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you for letting me go on that tangent, because I do love talking about inquiry learning. I think it's wonderful.
I just think it's really helpful for people to see that they're not always at odds with each other. And it often feels like you have to be in like one camp or the other. And I don't know whether that's a media thing, or I don't know, just the way that schools are maybe kind of pitted against each other a little bit. But I really think there's essential and beautiful things that happen in both to make a really valuable learning experience.
You just got to apply the correct one for your context.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that is the what of, jumping back to before my tangent, that is the what of the Extend and Challenge. And now the why. Unsurprisingly, deep learning happens when students understand and apply what they've learned, when they can choose effective strategies relevant to the problem and know what to do if they get stuck. And I feel like we would call that an expert learner, someone who's adaptable and flexible and goes, oh, I've got this toolbox of skills or knowledge or whatever, and I can now select from that to approach this problem. And I was a student who just got so stressed by open-ended problems because I just didn't know where to start. I was very afraid of making an error. I was afraid of the process of trial and error. But those are the kind of things that you want to foster in our kiddos when we're in this Extend and Challenge phase. Students also develop more complex mental models when they connect information, solve new problems, expand their understanding, and generate new ideas. So again, just applying the knowledge just makes it stick in your brain better. Guided structured inquiry offers opportunities to introduce additional complexity, new challenges, and independence. And that's a big one. Independence for me. We want agile learners. That's the phrase I was thinking of. We want agile learners who are independent. They've got a command of the foundational concepts or knowledge or facts and skills and whatever. And now we're pushing them down the hill on their bike without the training wheels. And they're going, I know how to do this. I know how to pedal. I know how to steer. I've got this. I'm going to probably fall off a few times, but I can tackle this on my own.
And I'm not afraid of making mistakes.
I'm not afraid of making mistakes because my teacher has generated a positive error climate in which we learn that mistakes do not equal bad, but they are just a part of the learning experience. And finally, when students tackle unfamiliar problems, they search their memory to generate and test new ideas. This process combines existing knowledge into new strategies, leading to new learning. So, by using what they already know in an unfamiliar circumstance, they're going to learn something new, which is very fun. And, we're at school, so please learn something new.
Helping students to actually do that, to search their memory, to find existing information before they sort of match that up with new ideas is really, really helpful. It's often seen as an explicit teaching strategy, like that activate prior knowledge kind of phase. But I can imagine that when you are doing sort of opening activities for a unit or a particular generalization, that the kinds of questions or the things that you're getting them to do are trying to lead them to something that they might already know a little bit about and bring that to mind so that in the context of this new learning and the new information that they're generating, they can actually sort of build meaningful connections through integrating that with what they already know and have already learnt.
Exactly.
It's also really important for teachers to position open tasks in a real world context. So if you're sort of using a really open-ended task as part of an Extend and Challenge, it's helpful for it to be set in a real world context because this helps students use their knowledge and skills to think really critically and creatively about topics that usually have some sort of personal meaning and significance. And doing that collaboratively can also be a really beneficial process when it comes to these Extend and Challenge kind of tasks. Self-efficacy, which is also something that I love to talk about, comes from when students have successful experiences of developing and demonstrating mastery in specific areas, and growing greater awareness of their strengths and limitations. Because when they are familiar with that and when they have a true understanding of what they can and can't do, I guess it provides a clearer picture for them of what they need to work on and what they can do confidently, rather than that being kind of clouded by their emotions or lack of motivation or something like that. And it reminds me of the example I gave last episode about the maths problems. When you have a challenging set of problems or tasks or questions that you want students to work through, by dropping in some easier questions as part of that extended challenge, that's giving them successful experiences, which is going to keep boosting their self-efficacy and help them along that trajectory of developing and demonstrating mastery.
I just had this random visual of like when you're playing a video game and your health is declining, then you go have some medicine, or like Fortnite when you have like, I think is it medicine? I don't know. You have medicine and then you can keep fighting some more stuff and you know, make some more progress and you might then be able to travel to a place and get a new weapon or whatever. But then your health is declining again. Then you have to go get some more medicine and then you can make more gains. It just kind of, it's not a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back, whatever. But it's non-linear is the approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now that we've established the what and the why of why we are here, we're going to jump into some of the key strategies and techniques from this document. And I have, of course, couldn't resist, I have recommended some thinking routines that made sense to me to include as some examples, because we love thinking routines at my school. We love them at Teaching Together. I just love them in my soul. They're beautiful. So the first type of strategy or technique that you might want to use is a generative learning activity, which basically it's kind of like a summarizing phase where your students have learnt what you want them to learn. And now we need to kind of solidify and consolidate that so that we can then use that as a tool for these extended challenges. So, for example, you might use a graphic organizer like a concept map, and they give an example of a concept map detailing atomic particles, where you have a box that says atom at the top and there's a line. It's kind of like a family tree. The atom at the top consists of, and then underneath that are neutrons, protons, electrons, and then there are some lines describing how the neutrons, protons, and electrons are all related to each other. So it's a graphic organizer. It's a visual representation of whatever knowledge your students are digesting. You use a Venn diagram, a classic. I have not used a Venn diagram in so long, because by the time my kiddos were able to do that and understand what the whole idea was, it was the end of the year. But I do love a classic Venn diagram. I also love a Y chart, which I have seen examples. So literally, it's like the page is divided by a huge Y. So there's 3 different sections you can write in. And how I've seen it done is you're thinking about, what does this particular concept look like, feel like, and sound like? And in kindergarten, going back to when I was programming with my colleague, I suggested we use a Y chart to think about what a kind classroom looks like. And I really love a Y chart for looks like, feels like, sounds like. I'm sure there are other iterations, but that's the one I've seen. I don't know why, but I just really love them. They're great. Another type of generative learning activity might be drawing. And here you might want to use the color, symbol, image thinking routine. As I've already confessed on our show, I am not the most talented of illustrators. But the idea is that you are given a concept, a text, a word, whatever. So you choose a color, a symbol, and an image that you think represents whatever concept, whatever stimulus you're responding to. And it's supposed to be like a gut feeling kind of thing. So for example, we did this as a staff. We, at the end of each semester, so at the end of term 2 and the end of term 4, we do a little tour of everyone's classrooms and do like here's what we've been doing in our classroom and here's some wins that we can share. And at the end of each stage's presentation, we said, well, pre-K made me think of this color and this symbol and this image, or, stage 2 made me think of this. And this one kind of irks me because what's the difference between a symbol and an image? But essentially, a symbol is kind of like a lo-fi illustration, like an emoji, or and I'm thinking specifically an emoji using the letters on your keyboard, not Apple emojis, where it's like the less than sign and a 3 for a heart. That's a symbol, whereas the image is more of an illustration. But this is just a different way of summarizing something, whatever concept you're addressing. And what's good is that it's not limited to responding to like visual concepts or anything like that. You can respond to a text like that or a scientific concept or whatever. So you're kind of developing your own shorthand. Then we've got self-testing or peer testing, which I always love to do at school, like creating like a Kahoot for your class or like your friends to do based on something that you've been doing in class, which is always fun. I remember the very first Kahoot I ever did was in year 11 ancient history when we had a prac teacher. And I was like, what is Kahoot? Like, what is this? Like random thing that I've never heard of back in 2015, which is 10 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
Am I old? Anyway, sorry, I just realized that. Another thinking routine I thought of, not that I thought of, that Ron Richard thought of, was the claim support question thinking routine, where you come up with a statement or a claim, you provide the evidence for it, and then you think, okay, what is a question that someone might have based on my evidence? But I thought if you wanted to integrate some more collaboration into this, I could do, like, for example, me, Grace, I could write a claim and support, and then Sierra could come up with a question that I then have to answer, and then vice versa. I thought that might be a more fun way of integrating, collaboration into that. But yeah, the generative learning activities are definitely more of a summarizing step to kind of consolidate what students have already learned. They're making their own toolbox at this point. And I can imagine maybe you'd say, I want you to spend like a lesson or this amount of time, maybe come up with 3 different resources that you might want to use. Maybe come up with a Y chart, do the color, symbol, image, and maybe make a Kahoot or something like that before they jump into anything else.
Yeah. So all of these are a form of generating information, so generative learning. And generative learning as a whole is one way that we can extend and challenge our kids.
Yes. It's just a subheading in this document, guys. So yeah, and I would, if you're going to use this, I'd probably put it at the start as like a launch pad.
Because it seems very accessible.
Yes.
Like, it seems like most people could say do color, symbol, image, or most people could probably have a go at making a Kahoot.
Yeah.
Or a graphic organizer. And then I guess the beautiful thing about those is that they can kind of be as complex as the student is ready for.
Exactly, because they are doing it themselves.
And so that's a great opportunity for differentiation.
Yes, we love built-in differentiation. And I have another image of like you're gearing up for a hike. Like you might be going on a 1-day hike, so you don't need to pack a tent, but you need to like put your boots on and whatever and your windbreaker and all that fun stuff. You're not going to go in your thongs and your board shorts unless you're insane. But someone else who's going on a 3-day hike, they know they need to pack, all that stuff. Yeah, we're getting ready. We're gearing up, I feel like, is the generative learning stage. It just makes sense to me to put that first. And then kind of the rest of these little subheadings we're going to go through are kind of interchangeable. They're just now kind of ideas that are in different kind of categories, essentially. But yeah. So we did address this in the what and the why. To adequately extend and challenge students, need to provide open tasks that are relevant to their students' prior knowledge and their lives, which is something that we do a lot in inquiry learning. And you were talking about it before, Sierra, but specifically with kindergarten, when we're looking at like term 1 kindergarten in maths, when we look at numbers and shapes and things, we go on a number walk, which was super fun last year around our school. And we're looking at like, can you see any actual like numbers, like door numbers or whatever? How many traffic cones are there? How many bins are there or whatever? And kids love telling us what their house number is, like their street number, because that's a tangible example.
Yeah.
That's something that's real and activates their prior knowledge, and we use that as a jumping point.
Yeah.
So that this concept is quite integral to inquiry learning. But I hear you asking, what is an open task? That's a very open-ended phrase. Well, there are 4 things to remember with an open task. They need to ask students to apply a wide range of prior knowledge in new and varied ways. You might even say novel ways. I love that word as an adjective. It's so fun.
It's a nice word.
It's so fun. So it's not you're not practicing one skill. You need to give them the opportunity to apply a large range. Your open task should have multiple solutions and multiple ways to get to a solution, because you want students to be able to show you the mastery of their skills, but also exercise some agency and some independence. And I love it when I've done like mini versions of this at professional development days or whatever, where like each table group comes up with a wildly different response to the same like scenario or stimulus or whatever. And it's just, it's so interesting to me how different people think differently. And what immediately comes to my mind is something that someone doesn't even think of. So an open task allows for that.
I know we keep talking about what we spoke about last time, but by integrating open tasks, especially from the early primary years, I think that's a really helpful way that we can, I guess, build into students that tolerance for like maybe not having the perfect solution, or understanding that not everything has a perfect solution. And then that's kind of teaching them that resilience and problem solving and trial and error kind of process, because they're not so stressed about it needing to be falling into either the right or wrong category. So I think even if you're not in an inquiry-based setting, working out how to integrate open tasks as a part of your extended challenge phase of your learning is really crucial for, again, contributing to that positive error climate.
And getting them used to a scenario where there aren't scaffolds and they don't have the teacher guiding them and going, yeah, you're on the right track. They kind of need to figure it out, which is, I like this stage because it does encourage independence, and we want our learners to be agile and expert. The next little category of technique is providing exemplars for independent practice. So they give 2 examples of annotated work samples, but also partially worked examples are given as a possible technique, where maybe there are some errors in a worked example that they need to address. Like I've seen some things like correct this like you're the teacher, mark this student's homework or something. Or maybe it's only there's gaps missing. No, the gaps aren't missing. The gaps exist. There are gaps.
I was with you.
There are gaps in the example that they need to fill in or whatever. And this is a bit separate to an open task. And it's probably more of a practice. Well, that's literally what it says. It's for independent practice. I wouldn't spend too long on this if we're wanting to engage our students in open tasks, but it might be helpful to go, like, are we confident that we've really solidified this skill in our toolbox? And you could even do it as like, I'm thinking, an entry or an exit slip if you're coming to the end of a unit, like all together. Maybe you've got an assessment coming up or an exam, and you need to make sure that these skills are at the front of your students' minds. I'm just literally pulling this out of the top of my head, but that's how I can see that working.
I also feel like that would be a really good category where you could put in one of those make a mistake on purpose tasks.
Yes.
Yeah. So, a challenge where you give them a scenario and they have to actually do it logically wrong.
Yes.
And then be able to explain to you which parts of it was wrong. I think that's, we've talked before about like examples and non-examples.
Yes.
And how that, if we're talking about providing exemplars here, I think providing a non-exemplar slots in really well to that section as well.
And honestly, I just personally find non-exemplars quite helpful as well.
Totally.
As like, it's kind of like a floor and ceiling scenario. I really love those. We use examples and non-examples in kindergarten all the time. We do lots of picture sorts at the beginning of the year of like, does this picture show kindness or does it not show kindness? Or is this a green choice or a red choice kind of thing? And we have arrived at the final category, which is really, I combined 3 of these subheadings from this document into one because I thought they kind of all said the same thing. But basically, problem solving.
Love it.
Yes, we love it. Problem solving and self-evaluation. Metacognition.
Yes.
All the buzzwords. And thinking routines really lend themselves well to this genre of technique specifically. And I would suggest maybe, and you're probably doing this already because you're all wonderful teachers, but in order for thinking routines to be made the most of at this stage, at this quote unquote final phase of our learning journey, you would want to have already demonstrated a variety of different thinking routines throughout the unit so that students can already draw on them. You don't really want them to be spending time learning the routine. You want them to be using the routine.
This sounds like it fits exactly into Andrea's Big Book of Learning idea. So as a class, you already have your Big Book of Learning with your examples of thinking routines, worked examples, maybe some exemplars from other things, and now they can actually refer to that Big Book of Learning to carry out whatever you're about to say next.
Yes. Yes. I literally, as I was writing this out, I had a visual of the scrapbook that I bought from Kmart in my brain. Like, yes, exactly like that. So I have noted 4 different thinking routines, just in case you're like, I'm a new listener. I don't know what a thinking routine is. Go back to our thinking routines episodes from like this time last year when we were baby podcasters because we're so experienced now. But we went into a lot of detail about specific thinking routines earlier on in our podcast journey. But there's 4 here that I thought lent themselves well to like a reflecting problem solving kind of phase. So a 3-2-1 reflection, 3 things I've learnt, 2 questions I still have, and 1 challenge I faced, which you could use at any point in the problem solving journey, not just when your students think they've arrived at a solution. You go, well, okay, today, just in this lesson, what are 3 things I learnt about myself? Or, because at this stage, it's probably not going to be content related anymore, like knowledge and skills and things. It might be, I learnt that this thinking routine that I tried to use actually wasn't helpful, or that maybe I thought I knew this concept really well, but I need to work on it or whatever. 2 questions you still have, I think would be helpful like in the middle of your problem solving journey. So you can go, okay, I'm actually really stuck on this bit. I've worked myself to like a dead end. I need some help getting out of it. And a challenge you faced, like I really struggled to think, like to come at this from multiple perspectives. I got really stuck with tunnel vision on one thing or whatever. And it's hard to be more specific because we're not actually solving a problem. It's just general. But anyway, you could use that at the end of a unit. You could use that halfway through the problem solving process as an exit ticket at the end of the lesson. Because then it would also give you as the teacher and the students a launch point when you come back to a different, like I'm thinking now of like high school, where you've got an hour of maths every for 4 days in a week or whatever. And you're kind of jumping around a bit. That's just what I thought you could use that for.
If you were using that strategy regularly, I think a really cool thing you could do is possibly have actually a spot on your wall for the challenges to be displayed. So, yeah, just so that we are promoting for our class, it's actually the points where we get stuck that are maybe the most powerful, the most meaningful, as opposed to the things that we've nailed already. Like those
Yes.
3 things that I've learned. Like that's great that you've learned them, but I'm actually almost more interested in what you're finding challenging.
Yes.
And that's where the deepest and hardest learning is going to happen.
Yes, 100%. And you could get super collaborative with it and have some dedicated time where students look at other people's challenges and go, oh, I've got a thought about this. Do you mind if I help you?
Totally.
Like the possibilities are endless. We love it. Then I've got a plus minus interesting, which I feel like, Sierra, you used to mention a lot last year.
Yes, I use plus minus interestings all the time as a very simple tool for evaluating, usually evaluating design ideas in my context. Yeah, because it's just really scaffolded. What are the pluses? What are the minuses? What are the interestings? And sort of then weighing those up. Are there more pluses than minuses? And one of the things I've spoken about over the last few weeks is needing to really boost my students' vocab around this. And, we don't just say it's a plus because it's cool, but actually thinking about, and I can see how this probably relates in an extend and challenge context. This could be made much more powerful if we're trying to say to students, okay, your pluses and minuses need to be drawing on the things that you've just learned. I think sometimes when I use this, my students aren't seeing the connection between like the design brief. Like we might have spoken about the design brief a few weeks ago or the success criteria a few weeks ago. I'm not talking about lesson success criteria. I'm talking about design success criteria. So, what does a car need to do or be to be successful? And a lot of the time, they don't link their pluses and minuses to that knowledge. And so that's something that I'm trying to work out how to teach them to do better at the moment. And so I think, using this at maybe this phase or as an extend and challenge kind of task gives them a protocol, not just for evaluating something, but a protocol for evaluating something I guess, against a criteria or trying to use it as then a springboard for how can I problem solve out of this? Because what I like to get them to do is if they do a PMI on a pre-existing design, what I try to get them to think about, okay, is now you have this resource where you've identified the good and the bad things of an existing design. How can you maybe design something that removes the bad things and draws on the good things? So like just trying to get them to use it as a springboard for their own brainstorming, but then also as a tool for their own evaluating. So it's very versatile.
Yeah, so you can use it to launch an extended challenge phase, or you can use it at the end. You can wherever. That's why thinking routines are awesome. You just use them wherever you want. Number 3, I used to think and now I think. And I'm thinking of this in terms of metacognition and self-evaluation going, I used to think this about my problem-solving skills, or I used to think this about my self-efficacy or whatever. Now that I've attempted this open task, or now that I'm halfway through or whatever, this is how my thinking about myself has changed, or maybe my initial approach to this task was blah, blah, blah. Now that I'm halfway through, or now that I'm at the end, I actually now think that this solution is a lot better because blah, 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 blah. So again, nice and flexible. And finally, we have a know, want, how, learn, a KWHL charty thing, which I have suggested could be used in contexts where students are choosing their own projects. So the idea is, KWL charts are used all the time. So the K is what do we know already? What do you want to learn? How could you learn it? And then what have you learned? And so I thought when I looked at, saw this routine, I thought you could use it for students to go, okay, what do I know about this topic? What's something that I'm actually interested in and want to learn? How could I go about doing that? And then once they've done their research, The learn phase could be, this is my report. Yeah, giving them, if they're in a context where they're choosing their own open task or whatever, they can, there's a starting point for them to generate some ideas of where they can go, essentially.
I think it's really helpful that you've suggested a context for where that one's helpful. I know that KWL charts are very commonly used, like you said, and I think just the one thing to always bear in mind about thinking routines and things like this is that we really need to think about what we want to get out of it. And I've used KWL charts before where students are like, but I don't want to know about this.
I don't care.
I'm like, okay, well, maybe fair enough. But I really could see how maybe this would be much more beneficial when I'm actually trying to guide my students who are about to start on major works. And, you know, they are overwhelmed with the scope at their fingertips. And, you know, to help them think about, well, what skills do I already have that I should probably utilize? But are there some new skills that I want to develop that would keep me engaged in the major work process? And then when they complete the learn part, the reflection on that, well, that probably could form part of their portfolio when they have to do their evaluations. And so I can see how that would maybe be. And I really like the addition of the how in this because, okay, now we're giving them some responsibility to actually go and plan how they're going to do it.
Yes.
Not just sit and twiddle their thumbs and expect that somehow magically they're going to learn all these things that they want to know. So yeah, I think I've been guilty of maybe trying to use some of these strategies, and this one in particular, maybe in a context where it's not used to its full strength.
Yes, it can be tempting to go, oh, I need to use a thinking routine. I'm going to use this one because I kind of know how it works, and we'll just see how it goes. But yeah, that's what I'm learning as well, is that like good, interesting, accessible learning, like everything has a purpose, which is exhausting to try and organize, but really important. So students are aware that what they're doing is meaningful. They're not just at school because the government says they have to be.
Yeah, totally. Oh, so there you have it. So many strategies that we could draw on that aren't just busy work.
Exactly.
But that are actually designed to extend and challenge our students and give them authentic opportunities to actually practice what they know and safely make mistakes.
Yes, we want to take responsible risks. We want to create a positive error climate where students are safe, where they feel cared for, where mistakes do not equal bad rush of adrenaline, I'm going to cry, but they're just a part of the learning experience.
Totally.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. It is a delight, as always, to speak to you from the past into the future. Podcasting is time travel. Find us on all the social medias. If you haven't already, we are at Teaching Together, the podcast. Rate, review, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. It is always a delight, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.